Feast is a 2005 released horror comedy directed by John Gulager.
Certainly is. It's basically a bunch of strangers in a tavern, sort of in the middle of nowhere, enjoying a nice drink and some pool and various other tavern-based activities, when suddenly a bloodied guy bursts in with a shotgun and says, there's something awful coming, you've got to prepare, let's lock this place down, etc., etc. And he's not lying. These horrendous-looking creatures come and attack and pick off our cast one by one, in varying gory ways. And that's it, basically, sort of 80-odd minutes of gore and screaming and splatter, basically, with a bit of plot thrown in.
Gun bullets flying and
maggots
vomiting about the
and
place, people being vomited over,
severed monster genitals and
all that. That's the kind of thing you can imagine to be in such a film. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, this is another Halloween treat for you.
Yep.
As it's Halloween coming up shortly. So, this is your turn. This is your choice. This
was
one,
my
isn't it,
choice.
Feast?
Sorry.
I'd never seen it before. I have to say, I was quite intrigued because obviously it's got Henry Rollins in there. We've done Henry Rollins before. We did him
way back in our first video.
The Chase, yeah. And he's always I'm a big fan of Henry Rollins as the musician and the poet as well as the speaker. He's a very funny, very interesting guy. And then who else is in this?
Balthazar Getty.
Balthazar Getty, the great Balthazar Getty, yeah, from Young Guns 2.
Yes. And Lost Highway.
And yes, and that's Lord of the Flies. Do you remember that from school? Did you watch that in school?
I watched the black and white one. I don't think I've seen the remake.
I think I saw both.
How many times has that been made into a film?
Twice.
Oh, okay.
The old one was a British film, and he did the American one. Balthazar Getty is very famous because his grandfather was J. Paul Getty, the big oil tycoon, has been featured recently in both film and TV by Danny Boyle and Ridley Scott alike.
Yes.
So, yeah, but he's a perfectly good actor. I've always enjoyed his performances. I've always been a big fan of Young Guns in Young Guns 2, and he was good in that, the second one. But, so I thought it was an interesting cast. Jason Mewes is in there as well, from Clarks, obviously, and every other film that Kevin Smith ever made.
Maybe not all of them, but most of them, yeah.
No, all those early ones. So we always grew up watching Clarks and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what's not to like? It was I was when I watched it and I was thinking about this, I thought, I'm going to slate this film. But then actually, kind of thinking about it, it's a horror film at the end of the day. Horror films, they're either this kind of horror film, they're never going to be Oscar-winning films, are they? Some of them are obviously great, and I think the trouble with this one, it's a bit, so it's kind of like From Dusk Till Dawn meets Evil Dead, but it's not as sharp-witted as From Dusk Till Dawn, and it doesn't have that kind of slapstick humour that Sam Raimi does so well in Evil Dead. So you remove that, the genius of Tarantino and Sam Raimi, and you kind of get a film that falls flat on its face a little bit, in my opinion. It's got some fun stuff in there, but you've seen it all before.
Well, I think it starts off well because it's trying to sort of, take the mick out of other horror films by introducing all the characters, and there's basically a title card for each person. It gives them a nickname and what they do, and then their life expectancy.
It's a bit video game-esque, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. But then it just, these life expectancies, they're just a joke, and then it just completely throws those out the window anyway. So, you've got like a heroic character, and it says, oh yeah, he's going to kick ass, and etc. And then he gets killed off very quickly.
Very quickly.
So it kind of is trying to turn it on its head a little bit, which it does to begin with, but then it kind of just...
It falls into its own trap
into
of being
the standard horror film.
One of the films it's trying to send up, I suppose.
And it does suffer with having several metal songs going on, which kind of a little bit overdone in horror film. I mean, I suppose this was 2005, so then it was like big, that was what you put in your horror films, wasn't it? Loads of metal songs, but now it's like, oh, really?
Exactly, yeah.
But I think what it's got going for it is I think the practical effects are pretty good. The monsters are quite interesting to look at.
Nice, yeah.
And it doesn't really take itself too seriously.
No. It's clearly they're just having a lot of fun making this film. Yeah, I mean, I think I thought the effects were quite good, but they use that kind of, it's filmed very quickly. So all the blood splatter effects is done like everything's sped up.
Yeah.
And you can't really see what's going on.
Especially at the climax, you can't. Yeah, it's all far too close and quick cutting and jerky, and a lot of it.
Which is fine.
You can't see.
That's a style which is fine by itself. But when you literally don't know who's dying or can't see what's going on, it's a shame because they clearly have some nice effects going on. And it would be nice to see those effects. Some horror films, when they kind of over CGI stuff, you're like,
it doesn't really. Yeah,
it doesn't work anyway.
It has no impact because it's not really.
No,
there.
but this actually does look quite. If you like gore and you like splatter and you like all that, you will get this in this film. But it's so quick, you don't really get it because it's like over and then they're moving on to something else.
Obviously, it's quite low budget, so I think part of that is maybe hiding some of the cheaper effects, perhaps.
Possibly, yeah. So we should mention. So this was. This comes from a documentary show in America called Project Greenlight, which was put together by, most famously, it was put together by
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon.
Most famously, it was put together by Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and a guy called Chris Moore, who's a film producer himself, and a couple of other producers. And they put together. I don't know the show. It's an American show. I've never seen it. I just read about it. But it was like this documentary series, and it was to go out and basically greenlight films by first-time filmmakers. I don't know what other films. I'd be maybe quite interested to see, what other films were greenlit by this project. So I think it's an interesting idea for new filmmakers, definitely.
Yeah.
There was one of the reviews I read about this mentioned that I think they'd seen the film because they'd seen that documentary. And apparently the filmmaker of John Gulager had quite a hard time putting this together anyway. So I think maybe from that point of view, as a kind of a look into how a film gets put together, if you watch that documentary beforehand and then watch this as kind of at the end of it, that's quite interesting. And maybe that takes away from me completely slating it because it clearly is I know how hard it is. We did a short horror film about 10, 12 years ago. That was like no budget and really, really short, but it's not easy. It's stressful, and so totally understand from that point of view. So I'm not going to be too harsh on it.
It was also exec produced by the late great Wes Craven.
That's true. Yes, so he obviously had a hand in it. Yeah, I mean it wasn't. I mean the trouble is when you've seen a lot of these kind of films, especially if you're well versed in things like Evil Dead and From Dusk Till Dawn, which are both great films on their own right, and other films like it, you start to just pick these films apart. That's the trouble with being a fan of anything, and I think that's what this film suffers. If you're a fan of these kind of films, you might like it, but you might not. If you're an old school fan of these kind of films, you would have seen it all before.
Yeah. So if you've seen Bad Taste and Brain Dead and things like that, the early Peter Jackson stuff, then this is not really a thing.
And that's the trouble with this. Something like this is obviously those films that started it all are great because they were the originals, and it's really hard to be original again. And if you're just too unoriginal, it just falls apart. There are films out there that keep up, ramping up the originality. This ain't one of them, I'm afraid. But and because it's quite, that's the one trouble with some films like this is sometimes they have casts you're like, who the hell are these people? But there are people in here and I think Balthazar Getty is great, and Henry Rollins. I've always enjoyed his performances anyway. He's great in this as well. Oh, he was in The Lost Highway as well, with Balthazar Getty.
Was he?
Yeah.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
He's the guard outside the door when he's in the prison. So there we go. That's maybe why they're in this film together.
Possibly.
Or not. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, Henry Rollins is always good fun. And he's playing something slightly... He's playing against type.
Well, he's like a motivational speaker, isn't he?
That's right,
so,
yes, exactly.
He does give a couple of speeches, doesn't he, to try and rally the troops.
He does. Yeah, he does.
The monster menace.
Yeah, it's one of those ideas that's been done. Group of people get stuck in a place, much like From Dusk Till Dawn, I suppose, and many other. Tremors is a similar one.
It is a bit tremory as well, isn't it?
Yeah, those monsters are a bit. They're kind of not quite sure what they are.
They just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, there's no real backstory to who or what these things are. There's a few sexual things going on.
It's like a little family of monsters, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's very peculiar.
It is. I mean, that's kind of the appeal, isn't it? You want something a bit.
There was a couple of moments
odd.
near the end where you kind of see the monsters.
Yeah. You know, there's some intelligence there because they like wear not a disguise, but they kind of.
They've got some kind of.
They've got some sort of a coat or something on it, like an animal hide or something, and then a like a skull of
like a skull mask,
of
isn't it, of some kind.
you know, some sort of cattle. I can't.
Yeah, so I think there's certainly an interesting ideas in there, but there's almost like so much going on at one time, and it doesn't really ever slow down. It doesn't. There's no pacing really in there, but it's a film. It's a first-time filmmaker.
Yeah.
And it's not terrible for a first-time filmmaker.
If you just want, a fun splatter fest to pass the time, then it ticks that box. I think. If you have enjoyed stuff like Brain Dead and Evil Dead and Bad Taste and things like that, then yes, it's very similar and maybe not quite as good as them, but it's I think you would still enjoy it.
And can you see this one?
Yeah, I picked it up on Blu-ray years ago. I mean, I hadn't seen it; it was dirt cheap, so I thought I'll give that a go. It looks fun. I saw Wes Craven's name on the front. I thought
that's the trick,
and it's got Henry Rollins in it. I thought, yeah, let's give that a go. So it's readily available on DVD and Blu-ray. I think in the UK it doesn't have any features. In the US, it's got several things on it, and in Australia there's actually an unrated cut, which is a whole 5 seconds longer. I don't know what those 5 seconds involve, but that one is in the wrong ratio. So, which if it's cropped, it make these scenes where you can't really see what's going on even harder to tell what's going on. So, there's several different flavours, but obviously depends what region you're in and what you can play and things like that. So, choose your flavour. Obviously, DVD is readily available as well.
So that was Feast, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Yep, and subscribe up there and watch some other videos over there. And come and join us on Twitter and Facebook to chat about some films over there. And come back next week for a brand spanking new video.